Welcome to Public Health on Call, a podcast from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, where we bring evidence, experience, and perspective to make sense of today's leading health challenges. If you have questions or ideas for us, please send an email to publichealthquestion@jhu.edu. That's publichealthquestion@jhu.edu for future podcast episodes.
Hey listeners, it's Lindsay Smith-Rogers, and today, as part of our series on vaccines, how compensation for vaccine-related injuries works in the United States. The Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, established in 1986, now covers 16 recommended vaccines in the U.S. Gary Golkiewicz served as judge in this program, known as a special master of the United States Court of Federal Claims. He joins Dr. Josh Sharfstein to explain how the program works and how it can be improved going forward. Let's listen.
Gary Golkiewicz, thank you so much for joining me today on Public Health on Call to talk about the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. Before we start talking about the program, take me back to the mid-1980s when this program was being thought of. I know you weren't working on developing the program, but what was going on in the world of vaccines in the United States in the mid-1980s?
Well, understand, I'm a lawyer, not a doctor, and was not involved in vaccines itself, but I have personal experience from my daughter was 5 years old in 1985 and was unable to get her DPT booster. My understanding after the fact was that was because manufacturers were getting out of the vaccine world because of liability pressures. I think I remember the number. There was 6 producers of DPT at one time. It was down to 2, and there was a shortage.
Got it. So kids weren't able to be vaccinated because the companies were fearing litigation.
Correct. With the DPT.
Right, particularly with the diphtheria, pertussis, and tetanus vaccine. So Congress stepped in and set up this program called the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. And as I understand it, this program had 2 goals. Could you explain what those major goals are?
The 2 goals were to provide the families a source of income, money, if the child was injured from a vaccination, and it was to do so with ease of process, with certainty of receipt, and generous compensation. That was the family side. The side for the manufacturers was protection from liability. You have to pursue your vaccine claim in this program first before considering suing a manufacturer, which because of later decisions from the Supreme Court is extremely difficult to do. And in fact, in my experience over 24 years in the program, I only heard of 1 or 2 cases pursued against the manufacturer, and the outcome I do not know.
Got it. So in a way, what Congress wanted to do was make sure that liability did not keep vaccines off the market. But at the same time, they wanted to make sure that kids who were injured by rare side effects of vaccines actually got compensated. So this was essentially a kind of tort reform, some people say. It's a way of assuring compensation. At the same time, you are protecting against huge liability risks that would keep people from making vaccines in the first place.
That's correct. And it's commonly referred to as a no-fault program. No one's at fault.
Got it. So regardless of whether it's the vaccine manufacturer's fault, if the child is injured by a vaccine, the family is eligible for compensation.
That is correct. I'll emphasize it's by a covered vaccine. There are certain vaccines that are not covered, shingles being one. Shingles is not covered under the program. It's only vaccines routinely recommended by CDC and with an attached excise tax.
Got it. So CDC recommends the vaccine, Congress applies an excise tax, and it can be in the program, allowing people to apply for compensation if they're injured.
That is correct.
So tell me a little bit about how the program works on, a more day-to-day basis.
On a day-to-day basis, this is again from the litigation side, you receive a vaccination, you suffer an injury, You look up, you go to the court's website, there's a list of attorneys by state. They, of course, are online. You get an attorney, you file a petition. It has to be filed within 3 years of the date of the injury. You file that petition with the Court of Federal Claims, where the 8 special masters are located. You also file that petition with the Secretary of Health and Human Services, the defendant in the case. You are suing the government. In effect, it's the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And the Secretary is represented by a group of attorneys in the Department of Justice. That petition goes to the court. You're supposed to include all your pertinent medical records to that injury. The court gets it. HHS has a group of doctors and lawyers as well. They review that petition. They take a position which the Department of Justice represents to the special master. If they have 3 options, in essence, they can say that the vaccine, according to the statute, caused the injury. They concede the case. You're entitled to compensation. They can file a report which says we do not believe that the vaccine caused it for various reasons. They contest the petition. They can say it's in an iffy zone. It may have some role or not. We settle the case. And it goes a process between lawyers that you'd see on TV, 2 lawyers negotiating a settlement of the case or setting the case up for a decision. If it's contested and gets to a special master will require the moving party, the petitioner, to provide an expert report supporting the case if it's not clear on the papers. The Department of Justice, with the Health and Human Services, that has a list of doctors that provide reports on their behalf. They get it in a battle of experts. The special master has to render a decision. Yes, no. If they say the cause goes in damages, if they say no, there's an appellate right. It's in the court system, the federal circuit, up to the Supreme Court.
Right. So this is a very serious legal process.
It is now. It didn't start out that way. It wasn't intended to be. It has just kind of morphed into, it's grown as the program has grown.
Let me go into some of the details. You said in some cases, the government attorney will concede the case and say, yeah, this is the kind of thing that's caused by a vaccine. I understand that some of those connections that are established side effects, rare side effects of vaccines, are on a table that make it pretty easy to determine whether something is known to be caused by a vaccine. Is that fair?
That is fair. I have to explain a little bit. When the program was first initiated, it was pretty much to address the problem with the DPT, the pertussis. And it was based on a study that came out of England that there were certain side effects. They created an injury table. And in essence, all you had to show was that you received the DPT, you suffered an injury that was listed on that table within a certain time frame, and it was presumed that the vaccine caused that injury. There was a lot of tension in the medical community when that table came out. It was a policy call, and the medical community had issues with saying that the vaccine actually interpreted it as a cause as opposed to policy. They changed that table in 1995. So that has shifted the cases from this presumed causation of the table into a cause in fact. So more of in line with traditional tort standards. And then in addition, much has changed over the years. The program started with 6 covered vaccines, polio, MMR, DPT, and it morphed into, they've added over the years as the program has been successful, it has created an atmosphere where manufacturers have researched, developed, and put more vaccines on the market. The program's now up to 16 vaccines, but the table has not kept pace with those vaccines, so everything is a cause and fact case. So the table is, unfortunately, the policy call doesn't apply as much more difficult for families to receive compensation.
Got it. About how many families enter this process every year?
Every year, it's over 1,000 now. And the other change in the program was that in the beginning of the program, again, because of the DPT, it was about 90% children About 10% were in the adults in the polio, the MMR. That has changed now. They've added the flu vaccine into the program, which is another 100 million doses. It's about 90% adults now and 10% children.
Interesting. So of those 1,000 cases, then it's only about 100 for children a year.
Yeah, I'm not up on the stats anymore, but I would say that's about right. Ballpark is correct.
And people can allege whatever they want to enter the program. There's no restrictions on what they can say a vaccine caused.
That's correct.
But sometimes it may not be from the vaccine what they're alleging.
Many times it's not.
And so how does that play out?
Well, that plays out. There's two categories of cases that make up 80% of the program. Half of the cases, 50%, are from shoulder injuries, which was added by HHS in 2017. And that can be a mechanistic result of the improperly positioned needle, or there's an allegation there's something in the vaccine, a component of it that gets into the nerves and whatever. But 50% of those are shoulder cases. Another 30% are flu GBS cases, Guillain-Barré syndrome. And of course, the elderly population is receiving that flu vaccine, which has a lot going on. So that's 80%. Then you have another 20% of a whole vast array of alleged injuries. And that plays out with the experts. That plays out with the doctors coming in, giving reports based on literature, whether or not the vaccine caused it. And then it gets into a courtroom setting, a battle of the experts, if you will, and testimony, and the special master ultimately decides.
And do you have a sense of those 1,000 cases, how many are actually decided in favor of the people submitting the claim?
The last statistic I saw is 90%. And that 90%, because a lot of the cervic cases, the shoulder injuries as a result of immunization, are documented in the medical reports. You go to the doctor very quickly with a pain in your shoulder, you just got vaccinated. And then the flu GBS cases, GBS is a table injury for flu. HHS changed that somewhere after 2010, so they added that to the table. So if you have GBS following a flu immunization within the appropriate time frame, which I think is up to 6 weeks, that's presumed that the vaccine caused that.
So it is turning out that the program really is a path to compensation for families that have someone who is injured by a vaccine. In that sense, the program could be said to be working as intended. Would you say that's fair?
I would say in a couple ways the program is worked. Going all the way back to the DPT, that led to a change to the DTAP, the acellular pertussis. It also, because of a case that I handled, a polio case, from children were getting, in rare instances, were getting polio from, the only polio in the United States was from the vaccination.
From the live polio.
From the live polio. So it changed that from getting that OPV in first instance to getting the IPV.
Right, the inactivated, not live polio.
Inactivated, that's correct.
So in other words, what you're saying is, first of all, people can get compensated relatively quickly, particularly if they have a recognized injury. And also, because you can see where the cases are coming from, certain vaccines have actually gotten improved, or vaccine recommendations have changed over the years, in part because of the program.
That's correct. And there's also a reporting system now for injuries down in CDC. And that has led to, and I know with the intussusception cases, with that first vaccine that came out, they saw an increase from the vaccination. They pulled it from the market, and I think they came up with another one. So it's had some other, the research end and the stabilization, the production end has worked.
Yeah, let me ask you about vaccines and autism, because there's certainly still some parents who are concerned that vaccines have caused autism, and that became an issue for the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. Families were filing claims under this program. What happened?
Well, in 1991, we actually received our first case that the vaccine caused autism. And over the next couple of years, a total of over 5,000 cases were filed. we have 8 people, 8 special masters deciding cases. There was no way that we could handle that many cases. So I was the chief special master at that time, and I brought in attorneys representing the petitioners, the Department of Justice, and we sat down, how are we going to handle these cases? We came up with a game plan to, one, allow the petitioners with the lead attorneys to develop the record, get more information. Studies were ongoing and so forth. And they developed 2 theories of causation. I assigned one special master to handle that as we handled the other special masters handled the other cases. All of this information for your listeners is online at uscfc.uscourts.gov. That's the Court of Federal Claims. If you go to the special masters vaccine claims, you'll see all the autism proceedings. It's all laid out. The decisions are laid out. They had a 6-week trial. I eventually assigned 2 more special masters. We had test cases. They were decided, they were appealed and affirmed that the evidence, the medical evidence, was insufficient to link the vaccines to the autism. I will say that those cases, recently, one of the lead cases filed a motion in courts to reopen their case based on some new evidence that was not brought out at that trial. That appeal was heard recently. The argument was heard recently at the Federal Circuit, and we're waiting an opinion as to whether they'll reopen that case. I'm not privy to what that new information was. I don't know.
Got it. But it would be fair to say that concerns about vaccine and autism were aired in court and had an opportunity for people to make their case, but the judges, the special masters, determined that there was not enough evidence to make that connection.
That's correct. They found against the petitioner there was not enough medical information to support that claim, and those cases were affirmed on appeal.
So let me ask about this program going forward. What are the key things for the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program to keep doing its job here, which is to provide an avenue for not only people who are injured by vaccines to get compensated quickly, but also provide an opportunity for people to make the case for something they think might be a cause of injury from a vaccine, as well as protect the manufacturers from undue liability? What's important for this program going forward?
This I can say on behalf of everyone, the government, petitioners, and the special masters. The program has not kept pace with the numbers. Again, I go back, it started with 6 vaccines. It's up to over 16 now. There was anticipated by the Congressional Budget Office that there would be about 150 filings a year going forward, which 8 special masters could easily handle. Again, it's jumped. We had that blip of 5,000 autism cases because of the Cerva being added, the flu vaccine being added. It's gone over 2,000 cases a year at times. Resources are a problem. There's just too many cases with too many vaccines to decide these cases promptly. So petitioners now, instead of getting a decision within a year, which was the expectation, in some instances, it gets out in complex cases, 6 years, 8 years. I've continued to mediate those cases in retirement. We've had cases that have been lingering for 10 years. There's a resource issue. The second problem is the table hasn't kept pace. Your listeners cannot see the table of events. Basically, the injuries have not, as they've added vaccines, they haven't kept pace with a table which allows you to decide cases quickly. You meet the table, you win, you're out of here, you damages. So you have this battle of experts, which is a court proceeding. Processes takes a lot of time, takes a lot of money. So it needs to get back to its roots, what the objective is. If you want to have quick, certain, easy compensation for petitioners as the quid pro quo with giving the manufacturers protection, you have to minimize the number of decisions. You have to grease it, basically, to move it quickly. So it needs a rewrite.
Got it. So this is it sounds like a solid program that's really been serving its purpose, but needs to be upgraded for the present time. It needs more resources in order to serve its role efficiently and effectively in the future.
That's correct. That is correct. And everyone believes that. It's, you approach it from different angles. People have different ideas as to what needs to be done, obviously, but everyone agrees it needs to be upgraded.
Can you give me a sense of roughly how much compensation someone might get for a vaccine injury under the program?
That varies depending on the injury. The compensation can be all your medical expenses, custodial expenses, help in the home, in addition to lost wages. There's no cap on lost wages. Pain and suffering has not kept pace. That's been capped at $250. There's been legislation proposed to update that to $500,000. That hasn't happened. So it depends on the cervic cases, the shoulder injury cases can be as low as $40,000, $50,000, $60,000. The serious cases, when I handled all the polio litigation in the 90s with the bulbar polio case, it could go into 8 figures. It could go $100 million over a lifetime. They're paid through annuities. So there's a wide range. The GBS cases, if it affects you to the point where you're in a wheelchair and you need help in the home and so forth, those can be in the millions. We had lost wages cases with lawyers, a baseball player. I mean, there's no cap on that.
So this is could be a very generous program for people who meet the criteria.
Yes, it can be. I've had a number of doctors. I have several lost wages cases with doctors right now. It could be very expensive. Just so you know, there's a fund. When you get vaccinated, you pay an excise tax. So each antigen is 75 cents. So MMR is $225. That goes into a trust fund. There's over $5 billion in that trust fund right now. There's been over 2 or 3 billion have been paid out over the 30-some years of the program.
Gary Golkiewicz, thank you so much for explaining this to us all today.
It was my pleasure. I hope I was helpful.
Public Health on Call is a podcast from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, produced by Joshua Sharfstein, Lindsay Smith-Rogers, Stephanie Desmond, and Grace Fernandez-Cesiri. Audio production by J.B. Arbogast, Michael Bonfils, Spencer Greer, Matthew Martin, and Philip Porter, with support from Chip Hickey. Distribution by Nick Moran. Production coordination by Catherine Ricardo. Social media run by Grace Fernandez-Cesiri. Analytics by Elisa Rosen. If you have questions or ideas for us, please send an email to publichealthquestion@jhu.edu. That's publichealthquestion@jhu.edu for future podcast episodes. Thank you for listening.